Welcome to Alternative Dog Moms Podcast. I'm Kimberly Gauthier, the creator of Keep the Tail Wagging. For the past 9 years, I've been blogging about raw feeding, pet wellness, and life as a crazy dog mom. I've seen massive improvements in my dog's health since I started raising my dogs naturally, and I'm passionate about sharing my experience to help other pet parents.
I'm Erin Scott. For the past 9 years, I've been researching and learning everything I can about healing cancer, allergies, autoimmune, and mystery illnesses in both my dogs and myself, and I can't wait to share with you everything I've learned on this journey. As the Alternative Dog Moms, we're bringing you all the latest dog health news that we're following and sharing the tips, tricks, and resources we learn along the way. Now, let's get started. Hello, Kimberly.
Hello, Erin.
So we are joined by some very special guests today.
Yes.
So we have the OG godfather of raw feeding here, Dr. Ian Billinghurst. It's such a pleasure and honor to have you join us today.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here with such beautiful people.
And we have Rob Ryan of Gussy's Gut. Welcome.
Hey, guys.
It's so wonderful to have you guys. This is so exciting to both of us because we've been doing this blog for close to 2 years now. I think we're coming up on our 2 year.
Congratulations.
Yes.
And I've had my books since about 2009.
Yes. And it's funny because, I have been feeding raw since I started in 2013, actually April in 2013. And, like many people, my impetus was I had a sick dog and a veterinarian telling me that my dog wouldn't live long past his third birthday. And thankfully, I was a blogger, so I was already in social media, in the blogging community, and hearing mostly actually out of the cat side. Cat bloggers were talking about raw feeding. And every now and then I would hear about people who were like, oh, yeah, I just go and buy a chicken and throw it in the yard and give my dog a chicken. And I'm just like, what? And that's when I was introduced to Dr. Ian Billinghurst and Give Your Dog a Bone. And it was like it made so much sense that it couldn't be that easy. That was kind of how I looked at it. But the more people I spoke to, there seemed to be two camps, people who were making it a little more complicated than it need to be. Yeah. And people who were like, oh yeah, making it so simple. And yet they had dogs that were, didn't have any of the health issues that you hear about. And they weren't spending tons of money. It wasn't super complicated. So I gave it a go. And the dog that was supposed to die shortly after his third birthday actually passed away a few months ago at 13 and a half. With EPI, he had allergies, he had digestive issues, he had all of these things, and he still survived 10 years longer than that veterinarian predicted.
That was Rodrigo?
Yeah, that was her Rodrigo, yeah.
Yeah.
Kimberly, you don't need me. You've just said it all.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, we can go now.
Thank you for joining this podcast.
You've given my message. It is so simple, and all those problems quietly disappear because they're all caused to the largest extent by processed pet food.
Yeah.
So, goodbye.
So my first question is, of course, going to be because, I took Dr. Connor Brady's course this weekend. And one thing that he said was that when he started looking into raw feeding, it was in Australia. People were talking about it in Australia. So Dr. Billinghurst, what was it? What was your connection to fresh food is the way to go with our dogs?
My connection goes way back to my childhood because I read books about dogs. And in those books, they all lived in the wild and ate real food. That was the first connection. The second thing was that my parents never allowed me to own dogs or cats. They were not animal people. And so I had this huge craving for these. So when I first became married at the terribly young age of 22, always a mistake, but we were out in the bush and we got a dog. I got my first dog. Her name was Candy. What do we feed her? Well, bones from the butchers and scraps from our tables, of course. And as a young wild man let loose in the bush with a gun at 22, which I could not do now, let me tell you, shooting rabbits for the family and for myself and the dogs. And she went out and she ate kangaroo poop and sheep and pigs, and because we were keeping pigs at the time. I kept pigs there for a while. That's what was my beginning. And I was thinking, as you spoke, that you started raw feeding. Kimberly, when did you start raw?
2013.
I started in 1969 with my first dog.
That's crazy. I was born 2 years later.
Well, just giving your age away, you should never do that.
We're the same age.
Okay.
It's crazy because, again, I grew up with dogs. My father he was a real big dog person, but my father was like you, where he fed the dogs bones and, scraps. And of course, at the time it was insane, and people would just be, oh, well, that's just how Walter is. And I had two households. So my dad's household, things were done this way. At my household, my dog ate kibbles and bits. And basically whatever we had a coupon for and what was on sale, my dog was extremely obese. And he died at probably 7 years old, I think. But that was just the way it was. If your dog died, you just go get another dog.
Yeah.
And so as an adult, when I started getting dogs again, I went with what I knew. And what I knew was you went to the store and you got dog food. You bought the dog food that had a whole chicken on the bag because that meant that was what was in the bag. And you bought them on the higher shelves because the higher shelves was the high quality dog food.
It was the good stuff. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Don't worry about reading the ingredients because they're required to use the scientific terms for the things. But I don't know who requires that. But so it's not bad. It's okay. And it's funny because looking back now, I have a lot of empathy towards people who do feed kibble. And when people say, I don't understand how people can do that, I completely understand because the marketing of these companies is so beautifully done that, it convinced us for decades to feed this way.
But your perception is exactly the same as your veterinary surgeon's perception.
Mm-hmm.
They leave it. Sure, they might be able to look at the bag and maybe read some of that stuff, but even they really wouldn't understand what they're reading in terms of what they're doing. They have exactly the same perception as you because they have been marketed to brilliantly by the people who teach them, the pet food companies. You can't blame anybody because and it's not even a conspiracy theory. It just is.
Yes.
Your vet expects dogs to be obese, develop pancreatic insufficiency, kidney failure, arthritis. That's normal. That's what dogs do, apparently.
Allergies. That's what I was told about my dog Rodrigo. I was told that, it's totally normal for him to always have loose stool and diarrhea. It's totally normal for him to be. He was 20 pounds overweight, but he was 70 pounds. No, he was 10 pounds overweight. He was 70 pounds. And my other dog, his sister, she was about 15 or so pounds overweight. But according to my first vet, they were perfectly normal. It wasn't until people started judging me on social media for my fat dogs that I realized, you don't know when everyone around you, when all of our dogs look the same, they're all eating the same things, and our veterinarians are all telling us the same things. Why would we question someone who went to school to learn this stuff? Why would we ask them questions? I think were it not for social media, Rodrigo probably wouldn't be with us today because that was the only thing that inspired me to start asking questions was hearing from people who were not in my community, but were in different parts of the world who were doing different things and seeing what they were doing and me being curious about it.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we're the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
Can you imagine what would happen to the veterinary profession if all dog owners in the Western world at least started to think about feeding real food to their dogs? It would be an incredible paradigm shift. It would have to be an incredible shift for those veterinarians. They would have to rearrange their mind because even they could not get past the fact that these dogs were so healthy and that they didn't have the problems that they were formerly seeing. I just, and it really staggers me that as a profession, we are so blind to the dogs that come in front of us. And I still hear it today. The person comes in with a raw-fed puppy, might be 4 or 5 months old now, looking brilliant. The vet says, "What are you feeding it?" They explain a raw diet if they're game. And the vet says, "Oh, my goodness, you're going to kill that dog." And they've just explained how healthy it was. They cannot see. It's that blows my mind that as a intelligent people, we cannot see what's right before our eyes. Anyway, I continue to be amazed at all at my profession. And at times I get very ashamed of it, that it's so poor in its approach to nutrition. It's unbelievable. Anyway, sorry, I interrupt and digress.
Oh, please. Were you going to say something, Erin?
Oh, I was just thinking about how, it took me going through like my own health issues and having to go outside the paradigm of what I was being told and then realizing, oh, I just completely made myself better after going through a year of tests and all these things, pills that weren't working. And I feel like it takes like a bravery to kind of start being like, oh, okay, if it's not working for me, like this isn't working for my dogs. And then you start looking, I think social media has played such a role in people talking about raw food because you're looking for other people who have done this because it's not kind of like what you're being told by the guy in the white coat that went to the school. And it's scary for lay people to be like, well, what do I know? I work in marketing or whatever, I'm just doing what I'm told kind of thing. And so I think that is interesting how social media is playing this role in kind of spreading the word right now about the success that people are having with changing, going outside the conventional paradigm.
Yeah. I mean, and also, so this brings us to the DIY raw feeding course, which it's funny because many of us, if you've been feeding raw for 5 years or longer, you figured it out on your own with the help of social media. And some of this was, if I knew what I knew today, 10 years ago, I mean, it's so easy. It's so easy. But what I see today, like it's funny, 10 years ago, people try to convince me it was so easy. I did not believe them. But then people started making it complicated. And I believe that. But it became so complicated that I didn't want to do it anymore. So I went back to the easy people. And that's where I've stayed, where it's not rocket science. You don't need a PhD to feed your dog. But what I'm noticing today is there's a lot of fear within learning how to feed raw, where the questions that I get from people are, okay, well, I'm going to do this and this. What supplements do I need to add? And they're expecting this laundry list of supplements to meet all these nutritional needs. And when I tell them, oh, no, they get all of their stuff from the food, they're just blown away. And I think it's because we still are thinking with a kibble mindset that we're going to feed our dogs, but we need this long ingredients list in order to make sure we're meeting their nutritional needs. So
and I don't think we're used to nutrient dense foods either.
Yeah. And so I was really excited to see the DIY. So what made you decide to come up with a DIY course?
Oh, Rob told me I had to.
Well done, Rob.
From the word go, this whole idea of raw has been spread through social media. I published Give Your Dog a Bone. I released it on the 17th of November, 1993 at a Bichon Frise conference. And by and I advertised it in all the canine journals of every state in Australia. And I sold out within 6 months the first printing of 3,000 books. In fact, it went so quickly, and I'd spent probably 2 years, or no, less than that, but I'd actually pretty well abandoned practice to write this book. So I never wanted to talk about it again, by the way. So, but I had gone broke. So the money that we got in from the book, I then started to pay back debt. And I remember I was selling everything to stay afloat after I'd written the book. And then I needed to write another edition, the second edition. I had no money. I didn't have the capacity to borrow money. Anyway, I had just met this lovely young girl, just met her, and she had just received an inheritance. Now, she met this vet, this divorcee vet, and she was in a similar boat, and he immediately wanted to take her money that she'd just got. It was literally the same amount that I required for that second printing, and take that money from her and use it to print this book that she had no idea about, except I had given her a copy of it on our first date anyway. We went to some friends of hers and we signed an agreement in front of the friends, and she made more money out of that edition than I ever made in one lot. But anyway, we went on and we joined forces, and she is my darling wife today, of course. What was the question?
Why the DIY course?
Oh, okay, yes. Well, that's right. And I was talking in about 1995, it was. Somebody came to me and said, do you realise that there's this whole thing going on? The internet had just started. And they said they're talking about raw food. And I got on there and I saw, and there were these, they were like evangelistic Christians talking, people who had embraced what was in the book. And there were other people, and there were these flaming things going on where they would talk badly about each other. Anyway,
Still is.
I can't get into any of this. Anyway, I walked away from that. But very soon I was invited to go to England. And from there, we did 4 major cities in England. The next year I was invited to go to America on the basis of this book. And we spent 3 months in America, touring right across America, 2 and 3 day seminars. The book took off, and the whole idea took off because it was simple. Now, if I'd have given them something that required spreadsheets and computers, which, by the way, I can't do anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not interested in that. I'd figured out this very simple way, and I wrote Give Your Dog a Bone. By the way, it took me about 6 months to work out that the introduction didn't have to contain the whole book until a client of mine pointed that out to me. Anyway, that's another story. And so this was happening right across America. It was so simple. And I remember in fact, my APDT lecture on raw food is actually up on YouTube. One of those very first lectures. But I was so simple. But then I've noticed over the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years, everybody's made it complicated. And people are making, I guess, money out of it being complex so that they can sell what is something complex, and they can sell their ideas, their knowledge, their diets. And I have long thought we really do have to do something about this. But until I met Rob, I didn't know how I could do it because I really didn't have a voice out there. The book had done its work. Raw was off. It had a life of its own. But here I was. Anyway, Rob actually approached me with his Gussy's gut. When I saw that, I said, yes, this is brilliant, because this is the kind of the missing link of what I've been saying for a long time, because I've talked about dogs raiding garbage cans, eating poop, they're coprophagic, all that stuff, burying bones and fermented foods. So I joined with Rob as an advisor to this company, which is great. And it's just grown from there. So when he suggested this course, I said yes. Now, currently it's nearly killing me, I might add, doing it. But I believe it's going to be a worthwhile legacy for an old man who still has a lot to say, apparently. And I'm very pleased to be saying it through this course, because I'm virtually trying to put my mind out there. Thank God, not all of it. And explain the simplicity of this almost in a complex way, because I've got it all written down here, and it's all in my computer, each lecture and each idea, and it's going really well. And I'm actually reading some of my words from way back then for the first time. Oh my goodness, this is not bad. Who wrote this? Oh, you did, right.
It holds
My
up.
wife says, loving yourself again, Ian? No, not really, but anyway. So there's the course. It is there to teach people how simple it is, but sometimes to teach simplicity, you have to go into a fair bit of detail. And then I tell people, but you don't have to know all that. You just have to do this. You don't have to know the details, because the cybernetic mechanisms, the homeostatic mechanisms that go on between food that a dog is designed by evolution to eat, the mechanisms that are involved between the food itself, the biochemistry of the food, the physiology of the animals, the feedback mechanisms within cells to make it all work, they're absolutely complex beyond belief. And we are only touching the surface of how all that works, looking at the genome, looking at pathways, biochemical pathways, looking at how food works with the genome of the microbiome, so there's multiple genomes. I mean, on and on. This is complex beyond description, but you can override all of that simply by feeding the food they evolved to require. And suddenly, hey presto, all those problems just quietly start to disappear. Yeah. And this is the simplicity of it. And it's like a person who decided they wanted to be their home mechanic and they're going to remake all the parts for their car. Why would you do that? What you've got to do is go out and buy the manufacturer's actual genuine spare parts, and suddenly it all works again. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every day, because it's been invented by evolution over millions of years. And somebody in the background says, "Shut up, Ian, it's time to stop talking. Let somebody else have a go." But that's the thing. I did it because it needs to be done. And I figure, as I look at people talking about this, I actually think I'm probably the right person to do it. So I'm doing it.
So is this available now?
It sure is.
Okay.
We've actually, because I'm actually producing this in real time, we're drip feeding it out to those who have enrolled, and now quite a few. It's growing. And I have somebody from Rob's office on my back with a whip saying, "You've got this one to do now, and this is your deadline." And thank goodness I've got that, because I think anybody whatever field you're in, you need deadlines and you need somebody with a whip, and away we go.
And so is this like an online platform where you log in and you watch the videos? I haven't seen the website yet.
Well, you explain the process, because I occasionally log in and it's only me talking, and I don't really want to watch that. So
Sure. Well, it's great to be here with you guys. Really, I'm a fan of your podcast. Listened to it many times.
Thank you.
I want to first just say that a lot of things I heard today I agree with. And one of the main reasons to answer the question that we created this course was just pretty much, I think, any reason that you create anything, which is, it's out of a need, a serious need.
Yep.
What we saw, we were doing our podcast for Gussy's Gut, and we were engaging with a lot of people that were, as Ian just said, Dr. Billinghurst just said, people were doing a really good job of overcomplicating things. And it reminds me, if anybody knows anything about software, it reminds me of like the open source versus the closed source model. So when something's proprietary, you have to use that product, like a Microsoft, let's say, versus a Linux. Now, I'm not going to get too deep in the woods for those that I've already lost with that analogy, but it's basically what we feel like we are is the Linux version. We're the open source. What we want to do is actually free you from constantly having to re-engage with somebody just to ask them questions here and there. Where people, I think, get lost is when they go to the grocery store and they have to make decisions based on what they can get. They then go, wait a second. This recipe I'm looking at, this spreadsheet I'm looking at, this document, I'm like, this doesn't comport with what I can get. Like, what am I supposed to do now? And so over time, people, and it just could be days or weeks, people find themselves out of their depth where, again, this is not complicated. However, to teach simplicity actually does need to be taught because you're dealing with the health of something you care deeply about. Your animal is just everything to you. So what we're doing is teaching the why dogs need these things and how you can take that and over time just focus on, we call it perfection over time. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think there are some people that would rather have you believe that there needs to be perfection every single day or at least every single week in order for your dog to be healthy. And that's what causes anxiety and fear and gets everybody, all nervous about raw feeding. There's nothing to be nervous about. Now, I was not like Kimberly when I first learned, and I learned from the best, this gentleman right here. I was referred by Dr. Marty Goldstein to Dr. Billinghurst. And I just started right away. I didn't even read his book. I started right away with consultations. And this was very foreign to me because I grew up in a house. We were feeding Alpo, kibble, and we would give like our cooked barbecued spare ribs. They were cooked bones. So I grew up completely the opposite of what I do now. So to give raw bones and to hack up turkeys, I was literally hacking up turkeys, and then to give them the giblets that were in the turkeys, the organs, where I was taught, like, you need to wash your hands like 100 times when you touch the turkey during Thanksgiving. It's dirty and it could kill you. This bacteria. We have all of these things in our head that when we bring them to our dog, we don't understand why a dog can eat that, why a dog can handle a raw bone, why a dog can handle organs, why a dog can handle raw chicken or poultry. So these things are taught in the course, and the course is incredibly substantive so that when you leave it, you have every tool in your tool belt that you can go anywhere around the world. You could travel, you can go camping, and you'll know exactly how to feed your dog perfectly, and you don't need to worry about it. So anxiety, fear, and relaxation is really what we're selling. We're selling you the ability to have total, absolute confidence in feeding your dog and doing it the right way and doing it the biologically appropriate way.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
It's a matter of principles. Not rules, principles. So that you can take any situation and say, does this fit in with the basic evolutionary principle of how dogs were raised by evolution to eat? And you understand implicitly by the end of this course those principles and how they apply, and then how simple it all is.
So please tell me that there's a unit specifically talking about the raw meaty bones, because I feel like that has been something that, it's, that Kimberly and I have both been making a concerted effort to add more of into our dog's diet, but it was kind of scary for a long time because there's so much, you can't do the cooked bones and you shouldn't do the long bones, or, there's so much anxiety about that specifically. I hope that is something that you'll definitely be addressing.
Absolutely. From the word go, we talk about that. There's dogs being scavengers for a start, but that's what they've always eaten. I talk about it in terms of the fear that people have of bones. and the way to approach that. And currently I'm actually working on it from the point of view of basically I've taken the information out of my book on my chapter on bones in Give Your Dog a Bone, because this was the most comprehensive thing on bones. And I think it's one of the things that people read back then realised just how important they were and took this up. Unfortunately, today, a lot of people think that bones are just calcium substitutes, but there is so much more to them than that. And I'm actually going through that lecture right now. And of course, then we talk about how to put all these things together. I'll just go through this course. First of all, I talk about raw basics. So there's all those lectures there. What are there? There's 13 of them, but they're basically talking about evolution of the dog, how it evolved and how it evolved to require certain foods. And then I talk about the so-called potential dangers of raw. And by the way, in the evolution of dogs, there's 5 different periods I talk about, including including the modern pet food era, and before that the period during which the breeds were developed, and then we go back further during the time when wolves started to follow humans. And this is all from mitochondrial evidence, that stuff. And we look at how the mind of the dog or the wolf becoming dog changed, and how their eating habits changed and became part of their genome, and particularly over the last 15,000 years. And a lot of work by a fellow called Raymond Coppinger, who's passed away just recently, actually, but his work is very important there. Anyway, then I talk about the potential dangers of raw. We talk about balance. We talk about bugs. We talk about bones. I talk about zoonoses, the disease problems that can be transmitted from animals to humans. And then I talk about, there's a period where I talk about foods that spell danger. So we're talking about things like onions and chocolate and macadamia nuts, all that stuff. I go through that. That's all the potential dangers. Then I go through nutrition itself. So looking at vitamins, minerals, proteins, carbohydrates from an evolutionary perspective. So even though I say in the course, you do not need to know anything, and you don't, about nutrients. You just need to know about food, because it's a food-based course. I still take you through that, because if you do have a sick dog and you start prescribing very specific foods, it's good to know why you are doing that. So I take you through that. Right now I'm on part 4. We're doing all the different. So the first one we talk about in part 4 is raw meaty bones, then meat itself, then internal organs, vegetables, fruit, dairy, eggs. Talk about grains and legumes, how they work together. It's really a matter of a lot of people throughout the world eat grains and legumes because it gives the balance of amino acids. It's interesting too, the so-called non-essential amino acids play incredible roles in the body of their signaling molecules and controlling molecules. So, and I point out this sort of thing all through the course. So AFCO says, they're not important. But they are. So it doesn't matter if they're not there, but it does matter. And this goes on and on. We have this imperfect knowledge, and I do a talk on AFCO as well. This imperfect knowledge that we use as the basis for all these spreadsheets and these gurus of raw who take this commercial approach and then start to try to marry it up with raw, because they don't understand the basics of what they're doing. Their basics have nothing to do with the National Research Council's ideas or AFCO's ideas or FEDIAF, nothing. They have everything to do with the biological needs of the dog based on how its genome evolved. Now, this is science at its absolute perfection. We don't have to understand a lot of stuff in science, but it's a good idea to have a look at it, understand what we do know, and very much understand what we don't know, but say, hey, I don't have to know what I don't know in this respect, because if I'm feeding what a dog evolved eating, then all the nutrients I know about, the nutrients I don't know about, the nutrients that are not yet have been decided by authorities to be essential, but I don't have to know any of that. but it's all there because I've included a wide range of raw whole foods based on evolutionary principles. And I can take that knowledge, as Rob said, and go anywhere in the world, look at what's in season, what's available, and select from that what is appropriate for my dog.
Yep.
And it's perfection through imperfection, because it's actually important that each meal is not complete and balanced. Organs need a rest. Parts of the body need to just concentrate on one thing at a time. We know that fasting is important. So an interval of time in which dogs don't eat. It's also important not to schedule food every day at the same time, because the body starts to expect that. And when it doesn't arrive, problems develop because the acids in the stomach, for example, are all pouring out expecting food and causing problems because there's no food there to deal with it. On and on. If we look at whatever happens in evolution and say, I'm going to try and mimic that as best as possible for my dog. Now, not in terms of hunting. We're not sending them out to chase down big game in packs, because that's dangerous and it's just not on. But what we're trying to do is mimic as best we can in an urban setting the foods that they would have eaten, and in the timing, the amount, the proportions, all of those things. But we're not going to get stressed about it because it doesn't really matter. We know that in the wild that nobody was feeding up a rabbit at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and another one at 3 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever. None of that was happening. So we don't get stressed about it. It's balance over time. It's perfection through imperfection. It's fasting if you don't have the food. If you've run out of maybe you're making bath patties, supposedly, and all you have left now are some raw meaty bones, chicken necks or something, or wings. You can feed those for a week. It doesn't matter. Now, the dog may get a little bit consto. Well, okay, so you can throw in a bit of healthy oil, a bit of cod liver oil, whatever. Sorry, not cod liver, olive oil, extra virgin cold press. But it's this understanding of how to approach feeding your dog. And probably the most telling thing is when I say to people, do you have a spreadsheet for the family, for yourself, for every meal? Is that how you do it? Do you go to a restaurant and say, this is my spreadsheet and I demand that you include every nutrient in this spreadsheet when I eat at your... Because if I don't have every meal complete and balanced, I'm going to die of some terrible disease of either excess or deficiency. Of course you don't. Nobody does that. So this is what I call the guts of the course. And you have to forgive that expression, but we had a lovely teacher back who said, you have to understand the guts, the dung and the blood of the feces. He might have said a worse word than that, I don't know, of what you're doing as vets. You have to actually get in there and think of animals in real terms and understand what they are and what their requirements are. And so I guess I've had some good teachers to help me get through to the basics of where we should be with our animals and understand very much that AFCO and all those people who are producing a commercial product have to be able to say that they're legally complete and balanced, that every meal contains all the right nutrients. So what do? They set up a system where there's a limited number of supposedly all an animal needs, tick the box legally, and away you go. And I point out in AFCO too, by the way, that if you want to really pass a test with something that really doesn't pass muster biologically, do a feeding trial. In 6 months, the worst food that you could possibly produce just about will pass an AFCO feeding trial. But the warning is, don't do anything outside the parameters that they ask you to do. Do exactly what they do, because if you do something else and it doesn't exactly fit in, and, for example, BUN or creatinine, which doesn't fit in when a dog is raw fed to their neat little box of where it should sit, they'll say, oh, you failed the test. even though you've passed their parameters. So there's all this practical stuff I'm telling people in the course. And it's so important that they realize that you don't have to follow these commercial norms. You have to follow biological norms. And that's what the course is about. But it takes a long time and many different subjects to get that across. Towards the end,
the importance of a course for everybody, if I can just interject really quick, the importance of a course is this man has 40 years and more of all of this knowledge. And what we've tried to do is distill it into a very easy 20 minutes a day, if that's all you can give to learning about your dog's food, and getting it so that it's so simple for you to learn over time and then take action on it. And then on top of that, in fact, tomorrow we have a live Q&A with Dr. B and myself. So every month we do a live video Q&A with our students. So anybody who enrolls can get on and ask very specific questions. And if you think you've got something that's an outlier, with your golden doodle who won't eat chicken and blah, 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 we'll come up with a solution for you. What we're designing this to be is a way to take you from this high anxiety, high worry, high concern to, you know what, I got this. And Dr. B, if you go on his website right now, you go all over from his book down to all of his lectures, he says something over and over again, which is it's absurdly simple. But it reminds me of something my martial arts instructor used to say to me. He used to say, common sense is only common to those who have it. And if you don't think something simple, you will immediately go to, well, I don't understand it. I'm going to make this complicated so that it justifies me either not getting into it or doing something that is easy in the short term, but long term, I'm just going to be tied to it forever. So a lot of these recipes and these spreadsheets and things, what people are really doing is they're creating a kibble. They have a kibble mentality with real food, but they're creating these perfectly, like, boxes are checked, same amount of zinc, same amount of vitamin A, but it's so on and so forth. And I mean, that's a great upgrade from kibble, but is it biologically appropriate? I think that's the differentiator, which is you can go from kibble to real food to biologically appropriate, species appropriate. That's where we play. We believe that's where longevity and health span live. They live with the species and designing a diet that's species appropriate.
Yeah. It's funny because everything that you guys are saying is so very true because, as someone who I constantly promote that I'm feeding raw and easy way. I want to keep it simple. So I do get the questions from people who are like, yeah, I would like it to be simple too. But what's interesting to me is the questions that I get where they're diving deeply into something and what you said, making it so much more complicated than it needs to be, where it's just like, it's not that deep. It's really quite simple. I mean, I tell people you don't have to do what I do, but you also don't need to make it so complicated, where you're now afraid to feed your dog because it's now become so hard or expensive.
Yeah. But this is the same thing as the diet industry. Same exact thing. I mean, we have so many apps to teach us how to diet. And what's happening here is nobody has to do anything. Everybody gets to do what they want. And I think the kibble industry should get its fair due. It feeds 100 million animals because let's face it, there are not 100 million people that want to feed raw. There's not. And if we want to fool ourselves and think that 100 million people will convert to raw, we can. But we have to let people we have to let them know what exists. We have to let them know that there is a biologically appropriate way to feed an animal. And if they want to come, they come. And if not, I'm just happy those animals are in their homes and they're being fed and they're living with them. And, everybody deserves a love of an animal. And but the way I feel about it is if you want the absolute pinnacle of nutrition and you want a dog that lives with both health span and lifespan, come over to Biologically Appropriate. And it's not going to be difficult. You'll make some mistakes. They're not going to be critical at all. A mistake is like, a day of diarrhea, if that, and it's not the end of the world. And it happens. It just happens. But it also happens with kibble. Mm-hmm. So what are we worried about here? And I'm concerned about quality. Here's what I'm concerned about with kibble, and here's what I'm concerned about with over formulating diets. It's the fungals and the oxidation of oils in these kibbles and all these really nasty things. Forget the recalls; those exist. But day to day, we know these things sit on shelves for over a year. All the stuff that's in them, they become toxic. They oxidize. And then with real food that's formulated, there's lots of variation in the quality of supplements. And if you want to, start your dog young, I don't start my dogs on supplements until they become like in the geriatric range. It's all whole food based because I don't want what supplements do to the gut long term, creating this like supplement soup in the gut. Why start my 3-year-old or 4-year-old or 5-year-old or 6-year-old on that? I'd rather start them at, 9, 10, 11, 12 as needed. And just be really careful about when you need those, great. There's some things you can't get, for example, if you're the Myo supplement which is out of eggs, created out of eggs, and I think is stellar. It's whole food, but I don't need to start it early. I'll start it when I need it. So just using things prudently over time and as needed. I think these mixes of supplements to balance. What is that called? Not fair and balanced. What's that called?
Complete and balanced.
Oh yeah, complete and balanced. A complete and balanced is like the best marketing term ever. And I've never done that. I've had big dogs that live to 16, super awesome lives, super athletic lives up until the very end, and they're not afflicted with all these horrible like earaches or fungal infections and itchiness and all these horrible things that these poor people have to go to their vet and spend all this money on.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It always makes me laugh when I see someone in the raw feeding community talk about complete and balance, as if we forget that that's what we were trying to get away from. That, not long ago, we laughed at that as a marketing term, but now people have now adopted it in the raw feeding community. But now that you brought up supplements, I thought that was a great segue to Gussy's Gut.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite supplement.
Oh, thanks.
My God, did it. Yes, yay. And so my just quick fangirl moment on the Gussy's Gut is I have a nearly 5-year-old dog, Apollo, who tested the beginning stages of leaky gut. And Gussy's Gut turned him around. I mean, originally I started him just on digestive supplements, and I was alternating between different types, just to keep everything fresh. When I first started with Gussy's Gut, which was the summer of 2023, he started showing signs of leaky gut again, which for him, it starts with he gets an itchy butt and soft stool, mucousy stool. And so I started, and I didn't even start at the dosage recommended because I never give the dosage recommended of anything.
Good for you.
I know I'm a rebel because I'm just like, you don't.
You're a thinking dog mom.
Well, yeah, I figure I just need to work out what his dosage would be. So I started, I think I started maybe twice a day, and I went down to once a day. I can't remember, but within a few days, I saw a complete change. And with him, I know my dog, and I know what was changed. And I have now switched to my dogs get Gussy Gut in their evening supplement. They only get 2 supplements, and that's their evening supplement. The morning supplement is a mushroom-based one.
Good.
And again, I don't give the dosage on the bag. I give what works for him, and I do it 5 days a week. And he has not had an issue with leaky gut since. And it's one of those where I just love the fact that it's fresh food, that it's fermented, that one bag lasts forever for 3 big dogs. So it's one of those, and it's allowed me, because I'll say, as a blogger, I can get supplements for either free or very cheap.
Yeah.
So it's not like I was breaking the bank buying supplements. But, like Black Friday weekend is usually the weekend where I've set aside hundreds of dollars to stock up on supplements for my dogs for the next year. This was the first Black Friday where I didn't have to do that, and I was lost. I did not know what to do because I was prepared to, and I had Gussy's Gut, and I had, my mornings. I didn't need anything.
I'm dying to say something.
Please do.
You're not feeding supplements. You're just feeding another food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Forget the word supplements. There was a food that was missing, and you popped it in the diet or in the food program.
And it's what I needed or what they needed.
Don't think of these things as supplements. And that's why your thought about the dose on the package, if you buy a bag of meat from the butchers, is a dose rate there how much you're going to feed your dog? No, there's not. It's food, and you feed what's required, and you work it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You watch your dog. It's like weight. How much food do I feed my dog? And there's an answer to that question, and I put in 2 pictures. And one is a dog with all these ribs showing, another one with its gut hanging on the floor. I said, that one needs a bit more and that one needs a bit less. And, of course, that's the only approach to take, really. We're feeding food. We feed the amount and the type of food that produces what we want to see. And we know what we're going to get if we're feeding real food. By the way, we also know what we're going to get if we feed kibble. We're going to get disease over time. Now, if you love your vet and you love going to see the vet and you've got oodles of money and you don't care if your dog is suffering a little bit, feed it kibble, because that'll work. You get to see your vet, you get to spend money, you make your dog suffer. Maybe you didn't like your dog. I don't know. I'm being facetious, of course, but really that's what it's all about. It's common sense. If you feed what they actually need and think of it as food, then they're going to be well. If you feed what they don't need and you understand that you're feeding a poison, that's, by the way, politically correct food, PC, is poison chalice. Just think of that. This whole nutrition business is absurdly simple, isn't it? It really is.
It's saving me so much money. It's really astounding. And, it cracks
and heartache.
me up. I love it. And my dogs are doing great.
Can I just interject something?
Sure.
First and foremost, I think the reason Kimberly called it a supplement is because it's on our package. We call ourselves a supplement.
But I can disagree with your packaging, right?
Yes. Well, you're in Australia. You're in Australia. So legally, customers have to understand. We legally have to give dosage. Whether we want to or not.
That's right.
We legally have to give you directions on the package. If you look at our package, all of the sections, they're essentially legally required. Okay. And so if you are a supplement versus a food, and we are not a full and complete food, there's totally different definitions for that. So when customers come to us, we make a very clear distinction. We are a supplement, but we are a supplement made from whole, real foods. And so we're really proud of that. And we walk our talk. I mean, this is what we've been talking about today, which is, if you find a way to go the whole food route, you'll be a happier person and you'll have less vet bills for things that vets don't even know how to treat your dog for. Vets don't want to treat your dog for those things, and they don't know how to treat your dog for a lot of those things, except to maybe give them a steroid or an immune suppressant or something like that. What vets want to do is keep your dog well. And I think also there was something somebody touched upon today, which was, your vet doesn't understand raw food. You can have multiple vets. You can have a vet that deals with broken bones and surgeries. Your dog swallows a sock, and there's amazing surgeons out there. You don't need to ask that surgeon about raw food. You can keep it to yourself. You certainly don't need to talk to them about fermented foods. They really won't know what you're talking about. And so you can have, people on redial, on speed dial, like your, amazing veterinarians that we know. We all pay attention. There's a lot of them. I don't want to not name some of them and name some of them, but they can Zoom with you and give you a consult. They can consult with you on your dog's gut health. Dr. Billinghurst personally is available for private consults still. It's just that his private consults are way more than the cost of the course. So that's why we're creating the course, for it to be more accessible to everybody, and so they can be free. We just want people to be free. And, my mission, my company's mission, and my mission is to add 1 million years to the lives of pets that we serve. And we'll do that through Gussy's Gut, and we'll do that through the digital course. And it's really important to me that we help people, just come back to nature and use nature to help their dogs thrive.
Would you give us just a little bit of the origin story of Gussy's Gut? And is that Gussy pictured on the package?
That's my dog Gus. And his actual name is Gusto. It's Italian for zest for life. He's lives up to that name. He got into the trash. I'll make a long story short. He got into the trash, didn't eat for, I think it was 5 days total. And then didn't drink for the last 2. So 7 days, it was getting really bad. And then he was he hadn't gone to the bathroom at all, because for 2 days he wasn't drinking. He wanted to go out to the bathroom, and I was like, what's going on? He pooped out this plastic bottle cap that he'd gotten in the trash, and it had obstructed his guts. Now, we'd done the sonogram and everything, and I went to a specialty place for it, and they couldn't find it. So we didn't know why he wasn't eating and then not drinking. So it was very, very, very worrying. And we did blood tests on him. We couldn't find anything. And so once he did that, once he pooped out, he let out a little yelp. I'll never forget the yelp. It was and it was a very high pitch. And he went right to, basically 2 hours later, wanted to eat. I showed him something he wanted to eat. What had ensued after that was really crazy poops. And I know you both know what I'm talking about. You could just tell, like, there's a big problem here. And so I started to look at ways I could naturally use food to heal his gut, not supplements. I did reach for a little bit of probiotics, but when I started to research probiotics, I realized how woefully there is a huge delta between what a dog's what microbes exist in a dog, and what probiotics exist for you to give your dog.
Yeah.
And the big truth here is, all the best vets in the world, and we talk to them all the time on our podcast, and you do too, none of them know exactly what each probiotic is supposed to do. They can tell you, well, this and this probiotic can stop diarrhea, but it pretty much is limited to diarrhea. Okay, well, that's useful because diarrhea is not a good thing, chronic diarrhea. But beyond that, what's giving overall gut health? So I started to study this, and what I realized is this is all during the pandemic. And what I started to realize was that it was really at Whole Foods, just like my diet had been for, I put my dog on raw late 1999 with Dr. Billinghurst. Those were my first dog, and then my second dog, and Gus is my third, and Labradors. And so I went back to nature, went back to Whole Foods, and then started fermenting it on my own. And once I saw the results in him, he had completely rebounded. Then I called up Dr. Billinghurst. I said, hey, you won't remember me. We spoke, we did consults 23 years ago, but can we get back? Can we do Zoom now? Because we were doing phone calls. It was back in those days. And can we do a Zoom? And so I showed him what I had learned. And he just said, this is, up until now, all we really had was yogurt, kefir, and tripe. But in Australia, it's really difficult to get tripe. And so he was really excited to break the code here for, gut health through fermented foods.
Nice.
How long did it take you to come up with what this formula was going to be and, source all of these ingredients? I mean, because it's a lot of different ingredients in there.
Yeah. I mean, it's 19, thank you. It's 19 superfoods, and those include tubers and greens and vegetables and herbs. And what we did is we looked at what is number one most beneficial, the most potent superfoods for the gut. Superfoods is an overused term, but I like to use it because it's just easy. We then said, what are people really not that much giving their dogs? What's hard to get? What's a pain to prepare? What do people not want? And so we try to find that happy medium, but we changed the formula 3 times. And in the first year, we changed the formula. And the third iteration was, we had so many people asking us, concerned. We didn't believe it was completely founded, but it was a concern of oxalates and so-called anti-nutrients that we took away those. We switched our ingredients and we went to a very low oxalate formula, which is what we have today.
Yeah, I've been using it. I just adopted a new dog about 6 weeks ago. And so it was so funny that the rescue brings her over with this bag of kibble. And I was, horrified that there was kibble in my house, for the first time in, 10 or 12 years. And so that's one of the things that we've had her on, since we brought her in, is adding in the Gussy's gut and getting her on raw and trying to get her, she has red sore paws and things like that. So it's been fun so far, seeing her and just seeing how excited she gets about food. And it's just been fun getting to do that with her so far.
Nice. Congratulations.
And that's the thing that I wish people would understand. It's feeding our dogs should be fun because it's we get to do whatever we want. I get to feed this morning, my dogs, I can feed, raw eggs, but I don't like their food to be super cold. So I made eggs over easy and just broke them over their meals. I always say that I feel like I'm Guy Fieri when I'm making a meal for my dogs, and I try to make it pretty. It ends up looking a hot mess anyway, and they don't care, but
so does mine.
I feel pretty special, Yeah. It's just it's fun and it's, again, not complicated, or at least it doesn't have to be. And what I appreciate is the statement. I was writing notes down because when we finish this, I'll be taking snippets out, and I was doing time codes. It's oh, this is good. But, just the imperfection over perfection is so freeing, because that's where I feel even people who've been following me for years, but they are afraid still to switch because they're afraid of doing something wrong to their dog.
Yeah. And
I often tell people, it's the first probably 2 years that I fed my dogs a raw diet, I technically wasn't doing complete and balanced according to what other people say. And even till today, there are people who I occasionally get a message from people telling me how irresponsible it is for me to be sharing what I'm doing because it's not complete and balanced. And I just go, okay.
Yeah,
It's like, it's what works for my dogs.
Comes with the territory.
Yeah, it's like, it's okay.
This is an important principle that the body, when it's fed real food, homeostatic mechanisms know what to take, even if it is not complete and balanced towards, according to AVCO, which is really based on processed pet food anyway, so it bears no relevance to real food. The body takes what it requires. And also the body, things like B vitamins, they say, they're not stored. Well, of course they are. If they weren't, we'd be dead in about 3 days' time because all our ATP production would shut down and that'd be the end of us. None of that is true. A lot of what we're taught in biology, it's just not true. And certainly this complete and balanced, that's an absolute myth. And I've seen dogs that have been fed, and I'm thinking now of one particular one. It was a Maltese, and it lived to 18. And its owner, who happened to be a relative, said, I only ever feed her meat. Well, that was him. I only feed him meat. But when you dig down, you see that this dog was also getting scraps of bones and lots of her food, and it was digging in the garden and getting all sorts of things and insects, and it was running in a field and eating poop. Dogs will naturally, particularly if given the chance, balance their own diet, but they don't. It doesn't need a lot. But one of the most important things is feeding it raw meaty bones, because a raw meaty bone in and of itself is almost a complete diet. So close it doesn't matter. You can just feed that. Now, your pups might get a bit hard, or not yours, but the dogs. But maybe you can balance that out with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, whatever. But truly and really, the dog, this whole concept of complete and balanced, that's a legal prerogative, as Rob was saying earlier, when you produce a product. It has to say these things. But let's face it, nothing from your butcher or anything in even in the centre of the supermarket for humans, nothing says that it's complete and balanced. It doesn't. We don't have to have that rule. So this is a very special set of rules we put together for our dogs, biologically absolutely pointless.
And I'll inject something that is the opposite of complete and balanced. We could have, and I will bet you we do have, dogs that, whether they're just supplementing kibble diets or real food or raw food diets with supplements, in the opposite of complete and balanced could be happening. You could have excess and dangerous. So, nobody knows unless you're doing blood tests all the time on your dogs. You don't know that your dog needs all that zinc. Mm-hmm. And you don't need your dog needs all of that, phosphorus and calcium and all that stuff. And with a raw food diet, people don't know that your dog can be missing, because of whole foods. Your dog can be missing, I don't know, X ingredient for several weeks, several months. And that's probably not going to happen if you're fairly knowledgeable on just some basics of feeding raw. But you're not going to have any negative health benefits because your dog didn't get some. I like to use zinc because I see that all the time on social media. It's always like a supplement du jour on social media. I start to notice like, oh gosh, they're talking about vitamin D today. Oh boy, and I know you both probably see that more than me, but it's really important to be honest with yourself that if you start playing around with Mother Nature with supplements, you got to know what you're doing, and you got to be very, 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 very honest with yourself that really it's only through blood tests are you going to know whether your dog's getting what it needs or too much of it. And then you better make sure the source is really good, because I won't give anything to my dogs unless I know the source is super pure and I know where that's coming from, Mm-hmm. So, and not every supplement's great.
And the other thing is this, that real food, the dog's body will reject. If it's in those right rough proportions of evolutionary food combining, if you will, the dog will simply reject what the extra food it doesn't need or the extra nutrients it doesn't need, because that's what it's done for millions of years. But as you say, when you supplement, you really do need blood tests. But then the question still arises, do we really know what those blood levels mean, and do those blood levels reflect what is actually going on in the dog's body in terms of excess or deficiency? And the answer is probably not. So once again, just feed real food in approximate proportions, and the dog's body, honed by millions of years of evolution, have worked out all the cybernetic pathways to deal with it. You
Amen.
don't have to worry about it. It just happens. Beautiful.
Yep. And one last thing is the same thing on the gut microbiome. We have tests that can tell you, well, your dog has this many of this microbe and this many of this microbe. Okay, so now what?
Yeah. What does that mean?
No vet will tell you what to do. No vet can tell you what to do. None of them. And again, we're fortunate. We get to talk. I get to have lunch, dinners with the best vets in the world, and they all privately will tell me. Sometimes they won't say it publicly, but they'll privately tell me, we don't know anything about the microbiome. We can't manipulate it. So we go to, it's like first principles. We go back. We always focus on super, super clean nutrients, whole foods, real foods, and functional foods, because every vegetable, grass, herb, tuber, they have functions to them. Mm-hmm. And we only ferment them so that they're easier to digest, get more benefit out of each one of those ingredients, and then give you this great gut benefit with pre, pro, and postbiotics. And so we're focused on just like let nature do the best, hardest jobs, because as people, we still don't know. We still don't get it. You know, the testing machines aren't good enough. The science isn't there on the microbe and perfectly on dialing in nutrition for each one of us and our animals. So if you focus on good quality principles, you're going to be happy.
Yeah.
Well, we'll make sure that we have links in the show notes so that everybody can check out the course. I'm very excited about this. And of course, to Gussy's Gut also. And we're so grateful for your time today.
Yes, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
It's always fun. And by the way, I talk about the microbiome at numerous points throughout the course.
That's the buzzword right now, right?
Right, yeah.
But it's important.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to just say one last thing for Dr. Billinghurst. This is for Dr. Billinghurst. Can I do that?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the course is under the Billinghurst Institute, and it's billinghurst.institute, www.billinghurst.institute. If you, over time, if you watch us over the next year, what you will see is some of the best vets in the world creating the best courses they've ever created there. What we want to do again is to meet our mission of adding 1 million years to the dogs' lives that we serve. We believe that educating these pet parents with these incredible concepts and keeping things very simple and giving people easier answers to their questions and concerns. That's what we're doing here at Billinghurst Institute. So I'm really proud, to be associated with the whole project. And, this is Dr. Billinghurst's big, this is his big school if it was a physical school.
Could say his swan song.
It could be a swan song. You could I feel like that's over a diving board, like you just be diving into a pool.
I've never heard a swan sing, actually. But anyway.
Well, that's very exciting because, Kimberly and I, we just always want to know everything about everything. So you're speaking our language.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.